Our last lesson in Unit 2 is happening right now, and we're talking about absolute value equations. So we've kind of looked at absolute value a little bit when we were doing order of operations, but today we're going to be solving for a variable in an absolute value equation. So you can see what the examples look like. We're asked to solve for like x, y, whatever the variable is, and I've got those absolute value bars within the equation. So that's kind of what's new today, but remember from last unit that absolute value measures the distance or how far a number is from 0. Okay, so since we're talking about distance, absolute value bars always make a number positive because you can't have negative distance. Okay, so if you think about the number line, so let's say that I'm asked, like, what's the absolute value? And we'll use those little bars of 2, negative 2, sorry, and maybe what's the absolute value of 2? Well, think about it. Positive 2, that's what the bars mean. How far is it from 0? That's 2 spots from 0. And negative 2, that's 2 spots from 0. So both of these equal 2. Okay, so today you're going to kind of be thinking like, all right, well, if I want the answer to equal positive 2, what are my options for what I could put inside the bars? Well, in this case, there were 2 numbers that would have worked, negative 2 or positive 2. So you might see 2 answers a lot on these problems. Now, before we kind of get into a few examples, like at the bottom, I'm going to give you guys 3 steps that I feel that you should follow to help making solving these equations a little bit simpler. Okay, so you should definitely follow these 3 steps. So before we fill in these steps, though, I need you to make like one thing noted here. So special note, seriously try to remember this. I'm going to keep like pointing it out in class, but something that you have to know, and this goes against like what you would want to do when you see these equations, but realize that you should absolutely never, and I'm going to capitalize it because I know it's going to happen, but like you can't do this. You can never distribute to an absolute value expression. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I know you guys like parentheses kind of look like the absolute value bars. So what I mean when I say that is talking about like example 5. People will take that 2 and they'll distribute it through to the absolute value stuff. Do not do that. Go against every like instinct that you have to do that. You can't do that when you're solving an absolute value equation. Okay, so I'm just pointing that out right from the beginning. We won't see that in every example, but I just have to say that you cannot distribute. Okay, so 3 steps that I'm giving you to kind of make solving these a little bit more manageable. So you should use these steps and think about them when you're solving, especially if you get stuck. Think, all right, what's step 1? What's step 2? So the first step is you need to get the absolute value bars. Okay, so like those 2 bars, whatever is inside of those, you want to get the absolute value bars alone on one side. So if there's stuff sitting outside the absolute value, like that 4, on the back, that 4, this 3, if there's anything on the same side of the absolute value that's not inside those bars, you want to move that out of the way, get it to the other side. Okay, once everything on one side is inside the absolute value, you're going to write 2 equations. Because like I mentioned up top, a lot of these, there are 2 different answers. Okay, so you got to write 2 equations, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to make a little note here, so that way you've got it in your notes. It's not going to mean much to you yet until you see an example, but the way that you write 2 equations is you set the expression inside the bars equal to the positive and the negative of the number on the other side of the equation. Again, right now, that's just a lot of words to you, but you'll want that in your notes because it will mean something as we start doing some examples. Okay, then step 3, you're going to solve both equations to get both answers because there are most of the time too. Okay, so we've got the steps in our notes. Please use those steps as you're working on these practice problems on your own in class next time. Okay, they are helpful. I'm giving them to you for a reason. So let's start off simple before we get into some examples that are a little bit more challenging. Like number one, I don't think you need any steps for this one. A lot of you could probably look at that and say, all right, well, what can I put inside the bars there to make it equal positive 7? It's the exact thought that we had up here. What has an absolute value of 7, or what number is 7 away from 0? If I'm thinking about the number line, well, I know that the bars are going to make that positive, so I could put positive 7 in for x, and the absolute value wouldn't change it. It doesn't make it negative if it's already positive. It just keeps it positive. I know I could put 7 in there and it would equal 7. I also know I can stick a negative 7 in there for x because I know that the absolute value of negative 7 is positive 7. Okay, so I don't really need to do a whole lot on that one. I can just look at it and say the answers. There's 2, 7, and negative 7 both work. Okay, let's complicate it just a little. This time we put a 4 outside the absolute value. If you see that, that's just being multiplied. It's just right in front. So it's like 4 times the absolute value of m. Well, I got to think to myself, what times m would give me, or what times 4 would give me 12, and that would be 3. So like if I put a 3 in there, the bars wouldn't change that positive 3. I'd do 3 times 4 and get 12. I could also stick a negative 3 in there because I know the bars would make that positive, and then I could multiply by 4 and get 12 again. So I've got 2 answers. They're 3 and negative 3. Let me show you how you're going to like use your steps to solve something like this if you couldn't see that right away. Basically, step 1 says get the absolute value by itself on one side. So this 4 is not inside the absolute value. You need to move that to the other side. Since you're just multiplying it by the absolute value stuff, you would divide it to move it over. Then you'd have the absolute value of m would equal 3. And now it looks exactly like example 1. So I could put in 3. I could also put in negative 3. Either of those numbers, when I take the absolute value, I get positive 3. Okay, so hopefully not that terrible still. If you look at example 3, this one looks super basic, but it's kind of a trick question. We want to say, oh, I'll just put in 9 and negative 9. Well, the absolute value of 9, if I put a 9 in for y, is 9. And the absolute value of negative 9 is also 9. So there's nothing that I can put inside those bars that's going to give me a negative number on the other side. So this is a case where there's actually no solution. Absolute value always makes a number positive. So if it's just the absolute value of something, I'm never going to get a negative number. No answer. So realize there are no solution examples within these absolute value problems. So kind of watch out for that. So example 4 is where the steps really come into play. Now, first step I told you was get the absolute value bars alone on one side. This has that already happening. Okay, everything on the left side of the equation is inside the absolute value. The 3, the x, the minus 6. So everything's alone. I don't have anything out front or behind it, so I'm good. Now, step 2, we haven't really used yet. So step 2 says write 2 equations. Now, here's what I mean by that. I know that I need to get this equaling 24. So, okay, I know I've got like 2 options here. I know that 24 could sit inside the absolute value, or negative 24 could sit inside the absolute value. Both of those equal positive 24. So basically, you guys, I just need this 3x minus 6 thing. I need it to equal either 24 or negative 24. So here's what I'm going to do, and this is where this little note comes in. I'm going to take the expression, so that's the 3x minus 6 in the example 4. I'm going to take that expression, 3x minus 6, and I'm going to set it equal to the positive and the negative of the number on the other side. So what I mean by that is I'm going to take that 3x minus 6, I'm going to set it equal to positive 24, excuse the line there, And I'm going to take that expression and I'm going to set it equal to the negative of the number on the other side, which is 24. Okay, so that's how I write the two equations. And then I just solve them individually. Think of them as separate problems now, and I'll get both of my answers when I do that. So let's solve this one first. I'm going to add 6. Don't even pay attention to that second equation. Just solve that first one. And then I'm going to divide by 3, and hopefully, nope, 30. I'm one step ahead of myself. I'm going to do 30 divided by 3, which is going to give me 10 for my first answer. And I could check that. I could plug that in here. I could do 3 times 10 would be 30, minus 6 is 24, and I know the absolute value of that would just be 24. Okay, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to solve this problem. So I kind of have two problems I have to solve on examples like this. And I've got, so let's see, negative 24 plus 6 is negative 18. And then when I divide that by 3, I get negative 6. Okay, and I can check it, and the directions even say check your solutions. So if I plug in negative 6 right here for x, and if I need to use my calculator, I can. I'd work out what sits inside the absolute value first. So I'd do 3 times negative 6 minus 6, and I know the absolute value of negative 24 is going to give me positive 24. Okay, so my answers worked out. Yay! All right, basically you've seen everything. It's just a matter of practicing it now. So we've got 4 more examples on the back. I'm going to skip number 5 for right now. I am going to do this one. This is about as complicated as it gets. The ordering isn't great on the back here. This should be example 8, but we'll save that one for last. I'm going to go ahead and do number 6 though. So step 1, follow your steps. Think about them as you're going through. Get the absolute value bars alone on one side. That means I need to get this absolute value of n alone. So this minus 4, that's on the same side with it, I need to move that over. So I'm just going to add 4 to get it out of the way. And then, I mean, it's just an n inside there, so hopefully you don't have to really like think about your steps from here. Hopefully you can just say, oh, I can put 10 in for n and get 10, and I can also put negative 10 in. 2 answers. Think 2 answers on these unless it's no solution. All right, I'm going to have you guys try example 7. I'm going to do 8, and then I'm going to jump back and hit up number 5. So maybe watch me do 8 first because 8 and 7 are real similar. So number 8, get the absolute value alone on one side. Okay, so look at the right side of the equation. That's where the absolute value bars sit. I need to get everything that's not inside the bars out of there. So this plus 3. Now, this is a positive 3, so to move it, you would want to do the opposite and subtract 3 from both sides. So that would give me negative 9 equals the absolute value of x plus 4. Okay, so think about this here. And this is, I'm going to write a note on this one so you can recognize this easier, but this is actually a no solution problem. There's nothing that can sit inside these bars right here that's going to give me a negative 9 on the other side. Like, what am I going to put in there? 9? No, that's positive 9. Negative 9, the bars would make that positive 9. So this is a no solution. And I want you to write a note here to recognize no solution, you guys. If the absolute value bars are alone on one side, so like everything on one side is sitting within those bars, and there's a negative number on the other side, it's always no solution. And that was a little wordy, but that's probably the best way to say it. If the absolute value bars are alone on one side, so everything on one side is in the bars, and there's a negative number sitting on the other side, stop yourself right there. Don't write 2 equations. There's no solution. Okay, jump back up and do example 5 here. Get the bars by itself. That's step 1. So, this 3 and this 2 need to move to the other side. Okay, I want to get this 3x minus 1 thing by itself. So, essentially, you're just solving for like this stuff. You want to get this alone. So I always say, like, think about, to decide whether you move the 3 or the 2 first, think about if, like, I just replace this 3x minus 1 with just x. How would you move this 3 and this 2? Well, hopefully you would look at this equation and you guys would say, oh, that's a positive 3, so I'd subtract it first because I would move what wasn't connected. It's the same idea here. So you would subtract 3 first. And you'd be looking at that equation. That 2 in front is just being multiplied by the absolute value. Do not distribute, okay? Here's what I said, like, in the special note at the very beginning of the notes. Don't distribute. You will always get it wrong if you distribute here, okay? I know you, like, we want to do that so bad, but don't do that in absolute value. Not the same as parentheses here. So you would just divide by 2. Okay, so bars are alone. Now I write 2 equations. Set the expression equal to the positive and the negative of the number on the other side. I think absolute value is hard because it's really easy to forget to write 2 equations. Okay, so I don't know, maybe there's like 2 bars, so there's 2 answers. I don't know, you gotta write 2 equations though, so try to think about that. I mean, I've seen people do this, like they do arrows from here, so they write an equation here and an equation here so they don't forget that there's 2 answers. But just try to really be thinking about that consciously. So basically, I need there to be an 8 inside these bars because the absolute value of 8 is 8, or a negative 8 can sit inside those bars, and I'm still going to get positive 8. So this 3x minus 1 thing, this can equal either 8 or negative 8, and that's going to get me the answer I want. So I write 2 equations, and then I solve both of them. So hopefully this 2-step equation is super easy to solve. I'd add 1 and divide by 3. I'm not going to do all the work there because I'm assuming that's easy for us at this point. But you would get 3, 9 divided by 3. Over here you would add 1. I will write this one out. And that'd be negative 7. And then when you divide this by 3, that does not come out nicely. So instead of you writing like negative 2.3 repeating, ooh, that's hard to see. I would prefer that you guys just leave it. X equals negative 7/3. And you can check them, you can plug them back in and work out the absolute value, times it by 2, then add 3, and you'll get 19 both times. Okay, so try 7, and we will practice these all day in class tomorrow to get better.